March 14th, 3.14. That's Pi Day. And this is my day to celebrate because I am the author of Social Media Pie, How to Enjoy a Bigger Slice of LinkedIn. And this is a very special edition of Social Media Pie, which is also my live broadcast show, because I bring on inspiring people to inform and educate you. And I had to maneuver the date and time a little bit on this one for all of you, because Pi Day is on a Monday. I normally do lives on Tuesday, but my very special guest with me here today is Dave Stokes. And Dave, you are joining me from Australia this morning, and it's Tuesday your time, if I'm not mistaken.
It is. I'm coming to you from the future.
Well, I am delighted to have you on with us here, Dave. And I want to invite our audience, those people that are watching us live, you'll see right down below, I have a little ticker running, and I would love to hear if this thing is working, because in the pre-pandemic, we would tap the microphone and say, can you guys hear me in the back? And then people would wave, or they would do the universal "we can't hear you" symbol, holding up your hand to your ear. And when we're doing this on LinkedIn, we don't know if the stream is working until people comment. So if you're watching, could you please leave a comment below? That lets us know that the stream is working and that it's sitting out on LinkedIn. Now, Dave, I had this happen a couple times to me before, where I host this through StreamYard, and for whatever reason, a hiccup happens and the stream doesn't go out to LinkedIn, but it goes out onto YouTube. So then I'll share it over to LinkedIn. But gotta love technology, right?
That's it. I mean, it's amazing in itself, isn't it, really? I mean, we can be, what are we, 23,000 miles apart, and here we are as if we're in the same room. So,
yeah.
It's first world problems a little bit.
Right. I mean, it's a great thing that we can connect with people from around the world and really on opposite sides of the globe. So it looks like the live stream is working. Hey, Joey is on with us today, and we have Sue joining as well. So thank you guys so much for joining, and we're going to get into the discussion. But before we do so, I want to introduce Dave, talk a little bit about, have you talk a little bit about yourself, Dave. And then we're going to have a great discussion today. You can see it, I think it's up yonder, about audiobook marketing tips. So whether you are a current author or you're thinking about doing a book someday and maybe converting it to audiobook, this is going to be a great session. You're going to learn from Dave, and I'm going to ask him all kinds of great questions. So Dave, for folks that do not know you, can you tell us a little bit about you and your business?
Oh, sure, Brenda. So for me, I guess the history is to position it. It started around about, I think I'm in my 6th year now. So it hasn't been a lifelong career, but there's been a conspiracy of a few different things that have occurred along the way, where it's all kind of streamed into the one river. So I have a background in music. I play drums and I sing, and I've done that with bands for most of my life. So that's kind of the music and the sound side. And the other side is that I've spent about 30 years in information technology, developing software, so software engineering kind of background. And a friend 6 years ago once just said, like, why don't you put these two things together and, offer audiobooks to independent authors and folks who've self-published, because there seemed to be a real gap in the market. And fast forward 6 years, that's where I am now. So essentially my service is about helping folks set up their recording environment, usually record from home. I generally advocate that the author reads themselves, particularly in the case, say, for Brenda, where she's talking about her own experience in the book. So it makes a lot of sense to have her across as the author. And then we get you through all the recording and the time it takes to get all that done, which is kind of a bit of an effort. Brenda, did you find like it's not a walk in the park doing the narration? You do need a fair bit of concentration, and there's setting the time aside, and also in your busy family life and things like that as well, just actually finding those quiet times when you can record.
Yeah.
And then, I'll go through and edit, and then we'll publish you out to all the major retailers, who often where your book is also available in your ebook. Mm-hmm. So the Amazons, the Audibles, the iTunes, the Google Plays, and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah.
How's that in a nutshell?
That's great. I love it. And when we're talking about the fact that there's an opportunity in the market, I completely agree. I'm not sure who that person was, but they were brilliant in nudging you in that direction. Because when I was going through this process, I mean, when I started the process of writing a book, like the printed book, it was intimidating. It was like I had it on my to-do list for years, and I finally bumped into a gentleman at a writers conference, Don Staley, and he had a book. It's called How to Write a Book in 30 Days, and I bought it, of course. And I had a conversation with him, and he helped me get the printed book done. It wasn't really a difficult process, but it can be very overwhelming going through, like, how do I get an ISBN and how do I get it listed on Amazon, all that stuff. And then
Okay.
when I got to the place of I got the printed book out, the ebook, all that good stuff. And then people started saying, hey, is it on Audible? When can I find it on Audible? Do you have an audiobook version? And I'm like, I'll get around to that. Because it's not just like you take the printed book and, push a button and it's an audiobook. I mean, it definitely is. It takes time. And there's also little nuances of the book too, Dave. And, we talked about this a little bit in the editing. I can't say if you picked up this book from the library, you're probably highlighting the pages. I can't say something like that in an audiobook. So I have to change some of the language in the book to match a listening experience part of it. So,
which you did a great job of, by the way. So it's fantastic, because and there are those things that you come across as you're narrating. So if you'd like to refer to the diagram below, there's the classic case. Number one, you've got to be able to describe the diagrams in your book, but also if you're referring to them, it's not kind of below for the listener. It's like, this bit next, or as I just mentioned, rather than, in the previous diagram. So as you say, you tweaked all those language changes very nicely, I think, but there's quite a bit to be done.
It's funny when you just said right now in the diagram below, I was like, is he screen sharing something? I was like, in my head, I was like, did we talk about him sharing a diagram? Because I know you have like a diagram of your process, but it's just, that's how our brain
visual
works.
Cues. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
When you say something like that.
Cues.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, we're here talking about audiobook marketing tips, Dave. So let's start at the very beginning of the process. And like, when I first found you, I had already kind of gone through part way of production, and I was like, I didn't know what to do next. And I reached out and I was like, I couldn't find anybody that did exactly what you do until I found you. And then your name came up 2 or 3 times. And I was so happy. I'm like, this is what I need. But let's kind of take it back a few steps. Someone is listening to this right now, maybe listening to it in playback later, and they're thinking about doing an audiobook. So what advice would you give them at the beginning of the process?
That's a really good question, Brenda. And that tends to, as time goes by, that advice seems to like update as experiences go along. I think one of the things for authors to think about, and it's something that does occupy your mind if you've already written a book and you've been through the experience, but also thinking about how you're going to fund this exercise. And there's been some really interesting new information and slight tweaks in the way that authors have been approaching this issue, where they've actually been thinking about funding their project first. So as opposed to I'll need to set aside thousands of dollars to do the audiobook, and once I've saved up that money, then I can afford to like self-fund the whole thing. There are quite a few authors now who are looking more down the sponsorship path, the crowdfunding path, those sorts of things. So actually preparing the budget for your audiobook before you go ahead. Now, sorry to go off track, and it sounds like I am, but there's actually a market.
I even think, like, as you're saying that, I'm like, well, wait, how do I know how much it's going to cost before I even got what are the elements of that?
That's a really good question too. So I'll briefly make my point and come back to that. That you have this enormous marketing opportunity if you're doing something like a crowdfunding campaign. In some ways, you're actually pre-selling your book, because you're gathering a bunch of folks who are interested enough to want to contribute to this project that you're working on. So you've actually already gathered up, and usually you'll have some kind of repayment back to the folks who have supported you in the crowdfunding, and often that'll be a copy of the audiobook. So if you kind of think about it, there's a little bit of circular logic that says, well, if I get a tribe together, ask people to fund it, you'll hopefully receive small amounts from lots of different people. You'll have the project fully funded, and by the time, and you can tell people the story of the audiobook the whole way through, which is usually part of a crowdfunding campaign. People are on board, they're in your tribe, and as soon as you finish your book, you've already got 300-400 copies of the audiobook that have to go out to all of your crowdfunders. So that's brilliant. Just kind of thinking, trying to tie the funding and the marketing idea together. But sorry, I've forgotten your question. So in terms, the cost.
How do you figure out how much it's going to cost to figure out how much you need to raise, right?
Good question. So In US dollar terms, so for my service, I normally charge around about $350 US per 10,000 words. So
Mhm.
if you've written a 40,000 word book, yeah, then that's going to be, oh, my maths is bad when I convert to another currency.
Just do it in Australian. I'll put it in the
Do
subtitles
an
or
Aussie,
the comments later.
because I've kept my maths is really crap, so I keep the
We'll ask
numbers
our
really, really
audience, people
simple.
that are watching right now, help to convert Australian dollars to whether it's
Thank
US
you.
dollars or UK or wherever you're
Let
located,
me
you can convert
know.
it and put it up on screen.
Good point. Okay, so nice tips. I'll stick to Aussie dollars. So $500 per 10,000 words. So that
Yeah.
means that a 40,000 word book would cost around about $2,000, and that includes the whole process. So that's chatting together like we're doing now. With Brenda, we had a look at her recording environment, understand what was going on through there. In Brenda's case, she'd already done a lot of the recording, so it was just a matter of confirming that was all good. And Brenda had followed all of the great technical steps and done a lot of research. So her recording was already in among the better that I've heard, which was fantastic.
Well, I have to give a shout out because I think he's still listening right now, Christopher Johnson. And
Ah,
Christopher is in Metro Detroit. He's a voiceover coach. And I did sit with him when I first downloaded the software. What's the name of it? Not Audible. What's it called? Audio something for the
the
recording.
software.
What's
Audacity.
Audacity? They all sound
Yes.
similar. I'm like, it sounds like Audible, but it's something different. So
Yep.
I don't know if I found Audacity or if Christopher suggested Audacity. I'm not trying to credit Christopher. You can probably help me out with that. But once I got the software, I mean, it's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of like, there's home improvement stores near me here in Michigan, Home Depot and Lowe's. I don't know if you have those out where you are, Dave, but like when I walk into one of
Very,
those
very similar.
mega big box home improvement stores and I just
Mm.
need to buy a box of nails and I'm like overwhelmed and they're like, can we help you find something? And I'm like, I just need to get out in and out of here as quickly as it's just overwhelming. It's just, I don't understand projects and saws and all. So I'm like, give me it's kind of the same thing when I opened up Audacity. It felt very overwhelming. It's like looking at like a switchboard and there's all these dials and settings and it's not quite as intuitive. Like once I started working with it, I started understanding like, okay, I need to adjust this level, make sure it's mono versus stereo, look at the sound spikes. So Christopher, I booked some time with him and he helped me to kind of walk through and experience it.
Oh,
And then,
good.
he really gave me that nudge I needed to get going with it because I wanted to narrate it myself. And then when I came to you, I had followed, Christopher's advice and I had found some other resources too to make sure the levels and everything were good. So I was, I got to you and I mean, I really was like, keeping my fingers crossed. I hope this is okay. I hope, because it was all done. It was all recorded at that point. I'd have to redo the whole thing. If you came back and said it's no good, I'd have to redo it from scratch. But I think, it takes a village, publishing a book and there's a lot of people you come across along the way. Is that true with many of the authors that you're working with, that they've already worked with someone before coming to you, or are they coming to you at the start of the process?
Generally speaking, at the start of the process, and my personal preference is always to talk to the authors right from the very beginning because we get to check the environment, and it's something that doesn't require a lot of expert knowledge, but there's probably 2 or 3 things that you really need to have crossed into. So again, you're really an exception in this case, Brenda. Not many of my authors will have actually gone to the trouble of doing the same research that you have, and certainly have taken the coaching as well. And I think coaching around the technology is a really good idea. As you say, it's real. It can be, what's the saying about being able to see the forest for the trees?
Yes.
It's a little bit like that with audio engineering software. Is once you know where to look. Yeah,
right.
Again, your Bunnings analogy. Well, sorry, we call it Bunnings over here, our home improvement stores.
Yeah, you know what I mean, though. Like once
yeah, I
you know
do,
that
exactly.
the nails are in aisle 9, it's not quite as intimidating anymore. But if you walk in, like a grocery store, I know where the milk and the cheese and the bread, I can find that stuff. But I walk in a home improvement store, I just, it's like does not compute. My head kind of goes haywire on it. And it
It's
was
a
the
great
same for
analogy.
me with Audacity. So
Yeah, it's a really great analogy.
yeah.
So I think so yeah, you've certainly done the right thing in getting some bites out there.
So,
And
so
there are
talk to us about
lots of folks
this
there.
the setup process. And I came to you kind of already set. I mean, I was already done with the recording, but you
Mm,
did ask me questions about, was it recorded in an environment without a lot of background noise? And I said, well, I'm in a home office. I'm in kind of a like a quad style home, so it's kind of like a sunken basement. It's pretty well soundproof.
yeah.
I turned off my aquarium. Nobody else was in the house. I used, a good quality microphone. Like, I felt like things were good. So
Mm.
I'm like, I think that's right. I mean, what advice do you give for people if they're going through that setup process on their own?
Well, my first question is, are the fish okay?
Um, it's a goldfish. He's not doing the goldfish is no longer on this planet, unfortunately, but
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to
it's a
ask.
little sad. Goldfish sometimes don't live that long, and I've been doing
No.
good with him, but unfortunately, the goldfish is no longer with us to celebrate the book. So,
Oh, sorry.
but
Me
sometimes
and my
goldfish
big
last a
mouth.
long time, and other times they don't.
Me and my big mouth. Okay, I had a similar story with some authors who are in the northern part of Australia, which is pretty much really hot all the time. It's I think they only have the weather guy or the weather girl only comes in like a couple of times a year when it's not 33, it's
Oh yeah.
not 98% humidity, and it's not raining. So it's this incredibly like hot tropical environment. And just on to show relevance, coming back to your story about about the filter pump for the poor goldfish, is that occasionally in the early days I would ask those authors to look, if you just switch off the air conditioning unit,
Mm.
because that will take a hum out of the recording, and they sort of sit back from the camera and look at me very quizzically, going, no, Dave, we don't turn off our air conditioning.
Yeah, it's
That
gonna be
doesn't
too hot,
happen.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's been
Yeah.
that learning experience of
I don't think
what you can control,
producing
what
the
you can't.
book and the fish no longer being with us are related. I don't think like turning off. I mean, I turned it off like on and off, and it wasn't like right after. It was like a month or two after I finished
Oh,
the book.
thank you.
So,
Thank you.
and
That
I
makes me
could have
feel a
just
lot
lied,
better.
but that's how honest I am, Dave. I can't say the fish is just fine when I know the fish is not just fine.
I
So I
know.
have to
Yeah.
be
And
honest.
as you can tell by that remark, like, I'm renowned for having a big mouth, and I sort of open it and just watch what comes out of it and go, did I really say that?
No, but there's nothing wrong with asking. So let's because we're here talking about audiobook
Yeah.
marketing tips. For all of you who are joining us a little bit late, we're not actually talking about goldfish today, but we're talking about audiobook marketing tips. But part of the process is making sure that you have a quiet room. And that was something that you had advised me, Dave. What else should people know? Because this is, I mean, we're talking about audiobook marketing, and you might think, well, marketing, that's like the packaging and the promotion and the
Mm,
advertising and the press release. But really, I mean, a lot of what I was reading about audiobooks is the quality and the perception of the audiobook is really, it's the audio quality. So if you don't have a good product, it doesn't matter that the content's great. It's, are people going to want to listen to it? If they're hearing crackling noises and a lot of things in the background, they're going to stop listening to it, right? So the audio is really
yeah.
one of the most important parts of the audiobook.
Yeah. I think that's very true. And there's I think there's a great benefit in doing some practice with yourself, in terms of, if you're going to read as the author, as you did, Brenda,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a great idea to spend some time just working out what your comfortable speaking voice is, how you're happy, how you're going to narrate the book, like where are you going to make emphasis in those parts of the book that are either emotional, or
Right.
they're incredibly big hitters in terms of tips for people, or
Mm-hmm.
those sorts of things. So to actually kind of measure out the emotional journey, if you like, or the energy journey of the book, I think is something that's important to do. So I recommend most authors have a crack at a few different sections of the book where things might be different, and have a think about how you're going to read them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the benefit you have as an author narrating your own book is that people are going to already being already be enjoying the fact that it is actually you doing the narration, because to hear a voice actor, although often a fabulous job is done, most people tend to come back with the feedback if it's read by another individual, to actually say, like, Brenda, I really thought it was you who was going to be reading the book. I mean, it's your book. It's about
Right.
your business and your experience. And I have this other, so people can kind of get a bit off-sided when it's a memoir or personal experience, or you're talking about what you've learned in business over the years, those sorts of things. If somebody else is reading, the people instantly going, oh,
Yeah.
so
It can be
it's
a little
not her,
off-putting.
it's
It's
somebody else.
almost like, well, I was part of the reason I wanted to listen to it is when you're listening to an audiobook, it's like the person is reading just to you. It's like that
Yeah,
one-to-one connection. I want to go
very
back
good point.
to and there's a couple other techniques I use for
Mm-hmm.
editing, Dave, and I bought one of these. Christopher Johnson recommended. I think it was Christopher, if I'm not mistaken. It's a little clicker.
Okay.
It's actually for dogs. Let me see if I click it if my dog comes running in the room. But anytime I would make a mistake, I would, and I don't know if I read this somewhere or whatever, but I would say, presenting Social Media Pie by Brenda Meller. Oh, I messed that up. So that creates like that little line in Audacity for you to help
A little
edit
peak.
it. Right.
Yeah.
That peak in there. And then I learned, like, sometimes I would go and it wasn't high enough, but if I like kind of slowed it down, and sometimes I would do like 3 of them in a row, and then I
Okay.
could really see the spikes, and that helped me out with editing. That was one thing that was helpful. The other thing, and you said this, you said it was already done recording at that point, and I did practice. I was on Clubhouse. Are you a Clubhouse user, Dave, or have you been on Clubhouse at
Yeah,
all?
I have been. Yep.
Okay, so in I don't know if it was December, it was the last couple months of the year, I was doing every Sunday, maybe it was the last few months actually, now I think about it. Every Sunday I was doing a chapter reading from the book, and then I would open it up to the audience for questions. And I did that intentionally so that I could get practice reading the chapters. And then I realized I said things like,
Nice.
if you picked up this book from the library, I can't say that in an audiobook, so I had to correct that. But what you said to me is, having narrated it myself, you said, did you do it in order? Did you do chapter 1 all the way through chapter, whatever it was, 29? And I said, yeah. And you said, you may want to think about re-recording the first few chapters after you're done, which was really brilliant, Dave, because in the beginning, you're nervous. You're reading the first few chapters. You're kind of like, I found myself a little bit more reserved, I don't want to say flat, but it was more like, this is what I think an audiobook should be. If you listen to one of the last chapters, I'm like entertaining. I'm like, I've got my voice inflection. I'm hitting my stride. Is that something you recommend authors do frequently? Like redo the first few chapters once they've kind of hit that stride?
Yeah, I think so. I think you've hit the nail right on the head. It's what I call what do you guys call primary school over in the States? Do you call elementary school?
Elementary school.
Elementary school. So we all have that experience at the age of maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 years of age, where we're in elementary school. We're called up in front of the class, and we have to read out to the rest of the class from the Dr. Seuss book or whatever it is that we're reading. And that terror and horror of having to go through that in front of your friends, and the inevitable fallout and all that sort of stuff, that I think a lot of us as adults, we carry that experience with us right the way throughout our lives. So when it comes to the experience of sitting in front of a microphone and doing narrating, I reckon there's a really strong possibility that those feelings of horror are going to come back. And so you need to spend some time with yourself to just go, look, it's okay. It's a non-threatening environment. I can get used to this, and I can spend some time with it. But I think there's kind of a little bit of an overcome or a bit of overwhelm to get through in the beginning. And as you point out, Brenda, that in the very beginning stages, we're more hesitant. We tend to read as if the teacher's like glaring at us, watching.
Right.
And after a while, as you say, you relax and you realize and go, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and this is a good story, and I want to convey all those emotions and peaks and troughs and highs and lows that are in the story. And so again, you're really match fit by the end of the book. So to go back and reread the introduction in chapter 1, the authors themselves hear the difference. That's always the interesting thing I find about it, is they'll go, like, I'm not going to be able to tell the difference. I mean, it's my voice. I hate listening to my voice. So no, just listen. Have a listen to pre and the post and see if you notice a difference, and without exception.
So Dave, let me ask you a question. Do you ever work with authors, and after let's say they come to you like I did with the whole book already narrated, and you start listening to clips and it's just feeling either flat or maybe there's just not the same energy that you would hope to achieve in an audiobook. Is that
Mm.
important for audiobook marketing? Is it important enough to coach the author
Oh,
on that, or what do you think?
oh, yeah. That's the that's the difficult question, Brenda. So
Mm,
that can be the really tough conversation. So generally speaking, my preference is always to speak to the author first, wherever I can,
okay.
wherever I can, um, because we can talk through some of those issues first,
Hmm.
whether they be issues about the environment in which it's recorded, or the way it's been narrated, or there are lots of things that you can sort of talk about prior to the actual recording. So again, I've got to make a special case out of you. You're very unusual in the fact that you got it so right up front.
Would you
That
have
doesn't
told me
always
though if I
happen.
came to you and it was not good? Would you have told me? Would you have said,
Yeah, I
Brenda, you
have
need to go
to.
back?
I have to. I have to. I'm shockingly honest, like you. You have to be honest about this sort of stuff, because otherwise, what you're doing is you're saying, sure, come
Right.
right in, Brenda. Like, give us your money, and we'll just publish you. And then all of the feedback that Brenda. Well, whether you get that feedback or not, that's the other tricky thing as well. People tend to be
Yeah.
kind, so you may end up with an audiobook out there that's kind of, yeah, not quite right, and people are kind of going, yeah, it was fine, I quite enjoyed it, and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. But in terms of the future purposing of the book, I mean, you'll no doubt use excerpts from your audiobook going into the future.
Hmm.
The book itself is basically got its own life now. It's got a perpetual life as a digital product.
Hmm. That's
So
true.
I think, again, back to the point really is about honesty. I think it's about being honest with the people you're working with,
Yeah.
and not selling them upstream. And I have the worst case scenario. I had one author who I asked to record 5 out of the 12 chapters of their book,
Okay. But again, if
and
it's
and
if
I
it's
felt
gonna
awful asking them to do that, but it really needed to be done.
but it's meant for the better good of the product, and we're here talking about audiobook marketing tips. We want to make sure that our audiobooks are of good quality, and you do this. I mean, this is what you do for a living. So, I mean, how many authors have you listened to audiobooks over the years, Dave? If you had a guess, like how many books have
Oh,
you listened
crikey.
to?
Well, I mean, just my own clients. There's 100 of them,
Right. So,
and many of those have done multiple books. So I think I'm probably up to 400
yeah,
audiobooks
so
now. I think, and mainly in that same category that we're talking about, the same genre of
mhm,
it's about business or self-help, or relaying information to others, sharing the experience, helping. If you share your mistakes, it helps others to avoid them.
yeah. Mhm.
That sort of genre.
So
And so, yeah, so from that
So
point of view,
lots of
yeah, it's
experience
a few
coming in.
books.
So let's talk about, so now we've gone through the process of getting the audiobook recorded. We've, whether we worked with you or on our own, and we have a good quality outcome at the back
Hmm.
end. And now this is part of the, when I came to you, I was like, okay, now what? Now what do we do? And how do we get the book
Yeah,
published out to, and in my mind, I was thinking Audible, like to the one source. And I didn't even think
yeah.
about the fact that there's other places. And so tell us about, like, what do you do next? You get to that part in the process. What do you do next? And what advice do you give to authors at that point?
Sure. Well, as you say, yes, that's when you and I started swimming in the same river, wasn't it?
Mhm.
That was a call out to each other. Um, th- there's um, there's a very distinct publishing pathway for audiobooks versus traditional publishing, and I think that's something that's still not well. Um, it's not that it's not well understood; it's just not well known.
Mhm.
So once you've been through, although once authors have been through both processes, they can clearly see the differences. I'm sure you can too, Brenda. Is that you go through a process when you're writing your book, and you do go through proofing and editing and
Mhm.
layout and all of those sorts of processes. You do something which is kind of equivalent with audiobook, but it's not exactly the same. And the publishing pathway is quite different. So instead of producing a bunch of text and words to a certain standard, what we're saying now is we're actually producing a story that's got to have a certain audio standard, and there's an expectation that it's going to be that it's going to be well told. It's going to be an interesting story. But there are other standards, but technologically they're quite different. One is a text path, the other one is an audio path. And so, as you say, a lot of authors sort of think, well, that's great. Like I just record the book and then we just send it out there. And to some extent that's true, but it is a growing industry. There are many more players coming into audiobook publication and distribution as time goes by. And so what that means is that there are a bunch of players who've come in to sort of facilitate that join between, say, Brenda and Audible. How do we get all of her audio across to Audible? And there are some traditional publishing pathways which have picked up on that, saying, oh, hang on, you guys come through us and we can, through our contacts through blah blah blah, we can get this to happen and get you distributed. So publishing in general is a very complex game, and I think to some degree it's been made to be so over the years, just to keep it that little bit elite and a little bit special, which is not a bad thing.
And I'm going to pull this page up right now, Dave, because I'm going to go back to my naivete, I guess, at the beginning of the process. I was like, oh, audiobook equals Audible, which is, if you are an audiobook reader, you recognize the third logo in the middle. That one is Audible. But lo and behold, there are, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 24 other publishers that, when I worked with you, we got it published out to multiple platforms. We submitted it in one place, and then it pushes it out to all of these networks, right? Am I saying that correctly?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. And thank you for bringing me back to the subject, Brenda. So essentially, this entity we use, I use a number of them. The one that I use in the main is a group called Authors Republic. So Authors Republic are described as a group called an aggregator. So what aggregators tend to do is that they will receive product from self-published authors, and then they will check those audio quality standards to make sure that they're going to be accepted by the Amazons, the Audibles. I can see the green bee or the white bee on the green background. That's Booktopia. That's a retailer in Australia. Rakuten Kobo, a lot of people have probably heard of. Things like Overdrive. There's the Apple Books symbol down there, the little blue one. Oh no, sorry, that's Hoopla. So what?
Yeah, I don't even like some of these. I've never even. I mean,
now
they say Amazon. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess you could do it on Amazon. I never thought about that, but like for me, I would have went through the process. I don't want to say wrong, but probably incomplete. And that was part of what I was looking for. Is like, how can I'm looking for somebody to help me get the biggest reach and impact. I want to do this the right way.
Right.
So, luckily you knew the right way to get me through there.
Sweet. Oh, that's kind of you. So yeah, that's essentially the process. So you've got the author, and you've got an aggregator who will put this together for you and be able to distribute it to the different retail outlets. Mm-hmm. And then within, generally within a month, it will be published everywhere, Brenda. So some of those little icons that we were looking at, they will still be, when I come along to check how your publication's going, I do it each Friday for my authors and just have a look to see where you've been published last. So we update these.
Updated.
We update all of these. So I would hope that yours will get out to all of the 24 different outlets. And so there's back to the marketing question. There's if you like the kind of the shot in the dark part of the approach, is that you know that your book's going to be going into a very large supermarket with lots and lots of other audiobooks, but there are lots and lots of eyes on those superstores, online superstars. So there's your chance at finding your audience finding you.
Right. There you go. And I love, it draws me back to marketing. And even when we think about social media, a lot of times people will say, well, do I need to be on LinkedIn or should I be only on Facebook and Instagram? Because I hear like Instagram or TikTok, like that's where I hear, where things are at. And I always think about, you want to go where your audience can be found. If there's nobody in your audience that's on TikTok, like don't waste your time on TikTok. But if you do have more of a mass market approach, you want to think about at least having a presence. And I usually tell my clients, like, reserve Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if bare minimum, set up the page and then let people know Like maybe I have a Facebook business page and I say, visit us on LinkedIn, like let them know where to go to find you, that you're not even active on there. But I think, going back to audiobooks, I mean, I'm an Audible reader myself. There may
Mm,
be other people that prefer Hoopla or that only use Bookmate or, Rakuten, whatever. Like finding them where they want to be found. And in this case, it's a place to buy or download the audiobook. It's not like a social media community where I need to keep up with the presence on there.
good
So,
point. Yeah,
right?
very good point.
So talk to me a little bit about there's other elements outside of the audio that you help people with. Cover
Mhm.
art, description, all the fields and the boxes and things that you need to check getting to the page, Dave. So talk to us about the importance of that as it relates to audiobook marketing.
Okay, sure. So I guess I can't claim any great creative part in that process. So generally speaking, in terms of, I mean, I can advise on things like dimensions and layout for the audiobook logo, for example. If we look on screen now at Brenda's book cover, it's pretty much the same, but it's subtly different from her paperback cover. So generally, a paperback cover is in a portrait shape,
Mm-hmm.
whereas for an audiobook, they still insist on you having a square one. So they want a square cover. Now, for some authors, that can be a very easy change. They can just call the graphic artist, and the graphic artist will just shift a few things around, and it'll all be done. But then again, you'll have interesting things. So, for example, in Brenda's case, we have that lovely photo of Brenda in the bottom left of screen, and
Right.
her shoulder is actually like crossing right into the, yeah, there we go, and
This
it's
is
in
the
the
printed book, and it's actually
other
on
side.
different sides. We flipped sides entirely,
Yeah,
and then we also kind of shifted the way the text appears too. So
that's it.
it's a little bit different. I mean, all the elements are there. It's just where they appear on the cover, rectangular or as portrait versus square. It's a little bit different. And
Exactly, I agree with you. And your graphic designer can sometimes tear their hair out a little bit, and you almost it's almost compulsory to use the artists who produced the work for you in the first place.
right.
Because, for instance, like where we see Brenda's shoulder is just a tiny bit cut off, just
Mm-hmm.
on that bottom corner of the book. If you're trying to change something from like a tall rectangle to a square, your
Right.
first instinct is to make it wider around the edges. But then we go, but hang on a sec, we deliberately cut the photo there because that was the edge of the book. That's no
Right.
longer the edge of the book. The edge of the book's over here. So
Mm-hmm.
there's I know it's probably a little bit techie to talk about this sort of stuff,
No, but
but
it's
it can
important.
become
I mean, when
vital.
yeah, it reminds me of like when you're little and you have like a bunch of blocks and you have to fit them into a pattern. And the shape of the pattern changes now, like the whole alignment of everything in the relationship from a graphic
That's it.
design point needs to change.
Exactly, exactly, and it probably doesn't. It's probably not that obvious, but over the other side of the book, where you've got the, what color is that,
I
Brenda?
call it
Pink, hot
magenta.
pink,
I mean, some people call it
magenta.
hot pink, some people call it
Yeah,
I don't know, like a bright pink or something, but I like
gotcha.
to call it magenta. It's like a warmer, richer pink. It's almost a combination between pink and purple, but it's got a
And
little bit
pink
of a
and
brown
purple.
tone to it as well. Um,
Yeah, it
so
does
I
do.
don't know. I like it's a bold pink is what it is, and that's my brand
Nice,
color. Yeah.
exactly. And you actually, again, it's not that easy to pick out, but that's actually got like kind of a fade running through it. So
Right.
so it's not just a solid magenta. There's kind of a fade that goes from like a more dense coloration to a less dense coloration.
Right.
Again, if that is like being cut off at a solid border, then you
Yeah.
can't just stretch the audiobook and just go, oh, we'll just black more magenta there, and then it'll look okay. Well, it won't.
Right.
So and
Yeah, there's
anyhow, that's
and even I heard from I think it was from John Asperian. I think I read on his blog, and I'll tag him in here
mm,
later. He was saying
mm,
like make sure that you have nothing in the lower right hand corner of your audiobook graphic, because if you put it out on Audible, they might say new author and they put like a swipe over the lower right hand corner, so you don't want to have it covering your book title or anything like that. So little things along the way. Dave, time is
really
like
good point.
flying by here, and I want to
Ah,
be respectful of your calendar and getting you back to start your day. And I'm
thank
winding
you,
down
thank
my
you.
day. I did add in to ask the audience, this is your chance. If you have any questions for Dave or if you have any comments to bring into the conversation, drop your comments into LinkedIn now. And
That'd
there's
be
usually
welcome.
about a 30-second delay, Dave, from the time I say that to the time that the audience sees it. And then might take them another 30 seconds to type in questions. So I'm buying a little bit of time as we see those coming in.
Beautiful. No, that's great.
But I do want to pull up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was
Dave.
just going to quickly say, Brenda, I noticed you're wearing something a little bit special today, and you haven't even mentioned it.
I am, because I'm waiting for somebody to say, "What are you wearing?" And I'm not going to show them until
I'll be
somebody
that
asks
guy.
the question. So I'm going to go to Christopher Johnson, and he says, "What was the most fun part of narrating?" Now, have you done narration as well, Dave, or do
Yes.
you? Okay, so for you, what's the most fun part of narrating?
In my case, it was understanding somebody else's story, putting myself into someone else's head, and hearing the circumstances they were in and the stories that they told, and being able to like vicariously put myself into somebody else's life. That was really very interesting and completely unexpected. I just was expecting it again to be like kind of a fairly straight read, but
right,
no, you
like
need
no
to be
connection
the
at all,
person's
right?
heart.
Yeah.
Connection.
For me, Christopher, the most fun part of narrating was actually not when I was narrating, but when I called my kids in. And it was just, I had everything all set up in my home office, my lighting kit, my microphone, or not my lighting kit because it was recording, but my microphone, my Audacity software and everything. And it was at the end of the day, and they came in and they're like, "Cool, what is this?" And I was showing them the setup. And it was the day, Dave, that you said, "Hey, you need to get the about the author produced because it's not in here yet." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." So I had, and it was, my kids are a little competitive, and I had my son, I said, "Why don't you do it first? And then Charlotte, you can do it next. And then we'll see who did it best." And I gave them the clicker, and they each read my about from start to finish. And then I produced a video of both of them doing it. It was just for fun. I think I put it on Facebook. And then I think I shared both files with you, Dave. And I'm like, I actually want to have my kids doing this, like in the finished book. So at the end of the audiobook, my kids are reading the about the author chapter. So for me, the most fun, Christopher, was hearing my kids read about me. Like that was, I don't know about you, Dave, but when I hear people reading my bio, it's kind of like, it feels weird when people describe you, like your background, your degree. But I mean, it feels weird. But when your kids are reading it, that's pretty cool.
That's true. Yeah, I loved it. I thought that was great. And that's one of those lovely evolutionary things that kind of, you don't necessarily predict they're going to happen and you don't plan for them. But that turned out to be a really nice little additive. And people loved it too.
It was
Brenda,
fun,
I think,
and the kids liked it, and now they get
sensational.
a credit as authors as well. They're mentioned in the audiobook. Joshua Meller and
They are
Charlotte Miller
narrators. Exactly, that's right. They are now published narrators.
They're asking for what their cut is, and I'm like, well, let you know when I make on the book. We'll talk about your cut. Hey Sue, thank you so much. Sue remembered it was June through August 2021 that I read it, and I think it was like every Sunday morning I did at 9:00. It was like a 30-minute reading. And it was a lot of fun. And I had some folks coming in, and we had it was almost like a book club, and we had a little discussion afterwards. And Christopher agrees with you, Dave, on the rereading the initial chapters, The Art of Self-Direction. So he's agreeing with you on that concept there.
Oh, well, I'm honored. Thank you. Thank you,
great minds. And you guys should connect because Christopher's in the US, you're in Australia, and you're specializing I want to say solely in audiobooks. Am I correct in that, or do you do other things as well?
Just about. Look, the last couple of years has kind of, it's not that I've been dragged kicking and screaming, but there's just been such a huge increase in podcasting, especially over the pandemic, but kind of leading up to that period as well. So I never planned to become involved in that side of things, but I'm producing, I think it's six different podcasts at the moment, with another two that are in the works. So it's become a really, it's interesting. It's different. Audiobook tends to be a longer term project. I mean, a short term project in the scheme of writing and publishing a book, but still, like it's a month sort of turnaround for the whole thing. Whereas podcast episodes can be, in and out within a couple of hours. So it's a different business, but it's still about storytelling. It's still about audio quality and those sorts of things. So yeah, a little bit of each.
Awesome. So I want to start to wind down our conversation here, Dave, and I'm going to pull up your LinkedIn profile up on screen. I'm loading it in the background. I'm going to pull this up on screen right now. So I want to ask, are you open to receiving connection requests from people that are watching, or
Absolutely.
is that okay with if people reach out to you? And I
Please
always tell
do.
people if you're going to follow, follow this request by Dave, that you be open to connecting with him. When you send him an invitation to connect, make sure that you mention that you heard him on my LinkedIn Live interview. Make sure you mention, hey, I
Mm.
heard you on the audiobook marketing tips discussion, and tell him if there was something that was helpful. Let him know that you actually did listen to it. And you can go to, here's his LinkedIn profile, linkedin.com/in/Dave Stokes. And I think you also have a website. Let me see if I can load that one up in the background as well. Author2audio.com. And if I'm remembering correctly too, Dave, I think when I first came to you, because of the time
Mm.
difference, I was referred to you, and I think I sent you a LinkedIn invitation. You were probably sleeping because it was that time difference time of day. And then I went on your profile. I think I found your website, so I poked around your website where I could learn more about you. And I think you even have like a stepped process on here, if I'm remembering correctly, like the different steps that
Yes.
you go
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
have.
here it is. Look at
I
this.
have.
Yeah. So, it was really nicely done. And I'm going to drop that link. Actually, it's up on screen right now, author2audio.com. Starting to wrap us up here for the day, Dave. Any final comments for people as it relates to audiobook marketing tips that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I think to some degree, take a leaf, folks, from what Brenda's done. One of the things that Brenda has done that I absolutely love, that I would love more authors to do, is to actually bring your audience into the joy, excitement, fun, frustration of actually going through this process. Take people through it with you. It's really, really interesting to hear how everyone experiences it differently, and to hear because we don't just want to hear all the glossy brochure good stuff about it, how these things work. We want to know which bits are a bit tricky, which bits are a bit hard, which bits take longer than others, and that sort of thing. So in terms of gathering up your tribe of interested people who are going to eventually hopefully buy your audiobook, I think it's on the money, Brenda. I think you're I'm just suspecting that this is part of your general marketing style, that you take people on the journey and gather people up and take them with you, rather than just
Absolutely.
say, "Hey, it's finished. I made a book. Buy it." Like, it's
Yeah.
not
No.
really an exciting marketing message, is it?
Yeah, no, for me, it's like I brought people away along with me every step of the journey, both in the printed book as well as in the audiobook. And I even had, like, for a while, I would tell people, if you see me or if you contact me, ask me how my audiobook is coming, because I need momentum. I need people like making me feel guilty when I say, "Oh, I'm gonna do it this week." Like, I need that. I needed that built-in, like, checks and balance. And through the
Yeah,
process, even like the cover
encouragement.
design, I mean, they were very similar covers designed for the audiobook, but I put them out on social media. I said, here's 4 options. Which one do you like the best and why? And I even had someone reach out to me recently who said, I've been following your book journey. And they didn't look it up on Amazon yet, but they said, what subtitle did you go with? Because when I originally had Social Media Pie, I had like 3 or 4 options for subtitles. And they said, did
Mm-hmm.
you end up choosing my option, the one that I suggested? Like, it was like
Mm.
that ownership. Like, it wasn't like I want royalties. It was more like, did you choose the one that I told you should do? Because I want to be a part of
Yeah,
this. Like, that
yeah,
pride,
yeah.
right?
That's
So,
right, and that's inclusion. It's a big element of friendship, isn't it too?
yeah.
We want to feel that we don't want to run our friends' lives, but it's nice to know that we did that little thing.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely builds up the community. And then when you do get all the way through the process, whether it's a printed book or an
Yeah.
audiobook, when you
Yep.
announce it, when you launch it, it's not, you're not just launching your book, it's like the community's book. Like, you guys, it's
Beautiful.
here. Everybody gather around because you helped to make this happen. And then, you have people that are almost like, when does pre-sale open? Like, when, like, let me give you my money now, because I want to be like the first person to say I have the audiobook and I downloaded it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
great,
That's it.
great
No, that's
advice
it.
today, Dave. I feel like we could definitely talk for probably another hour, but I want to be respectful of your calendar, and
Not
I
you
want
and
to make
me,
sure you.
surely. Quiet little reserve types.
Yeah. So any final comments on how people can get a hold of you if they're interested in working with you, or anything else before we wrap up
Oh,
today?
sure. I mean, look, I love an email. I love a LinkedIn invitation as well. So I think at the beginning for me, I think I'm probably a bit of a slow to warm up child. So I love just hearing a little ping from someone just saying, "Hey, I'm interested in this," or just say hi, and then just start a little bit of a chat going. And I'm always happy to talk in these environments too, and chat for folks for 15, 20 minutes, just shooting the breeze. Thinking about an audiobook or thinking about a podcast. Be my guest and just come and have a chat, because I think it's a storytelling business. So it starts with telling stories and ends with telling stories. So that's I think that's kind of what it's all about. But thank you very much,
That's
Brenda.
awesome.
It's just a great opportunity to talk to you. And you still haven't told us about
Nobody's
your
asked.
outfit.
Like, and granted, Dave,
I'm asking. I
this
haven't
is a
stopped
different
asking.
time of day than we normally would broadcast. It's a little bit lower, but I'll show this because there'll be a playback. People will be like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
let's have a
she didn't
look.
show us." I'm wearing a pie, you guys. It's Pie Day. It's National. I don't know if it's National Pie Day, but 3.14 March 14th is Pie Day, and I even have a back of the pie tin on my costume. It's not just the front; it's the back. So wearing a pie costume. It's really hard to sit in a chair when you're wearing a pie costume. By the way,
You've done very well. What flavor is it?
I
know
think
it's
it would
lattice.
probably be like a cherry pie or a strawberry. I don't know.
Cherry
It's
pie.
red felt, so it's
Beautiful.
I don't know. It's just a pattern
Very
I saw
nice.
somewhere, and I'm like, oh, that's cute.
Don't go putting yourself in the oven.
Right. No. And it's sewn onto an apron because baker's apron, all that good stuff. Well, Dave, this has been a delight. Sue, you said it also. Yes, this has been great. It's been just a lot of fun chatting with you here today, Dave. And I look forward to continuing to refer people over to you to check out your audiobook marketing services. And in the meantime, I'm going to go eat dinner, and I'm going to have a slice of pie to finish off my day. And hopefully you can do the same as well, Dave.
Beautiful. Thank you, Brenda.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching. When you're done watching this video, I want you to do a favor. Go back to the video. There'll be a little share button underneath it. Click on share and share it with your LinkedIn network. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can do the same as well. Share it along with others. Tell people something that you learned by watching this video. You never know when you're going to reach somebody who might be an author already in the works, who's thinking about going and doing an audiobook, or maybe an aspiring author. This might be the nudge that they need. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, evening, or good morning, wherever you are. And we'll see all of you later on LinkedIn. Take care, everyone.